Second sticks.
And action. And we cut.
Welcome.
Everyone.
Let's start with your relation to the summer book before you came onto this project.
Yeah. I mean, I think people's first reaction is, what is a 40-year-old male American doing, telling this story or wanting to tell this story? And I think for me, I mean, it started honestly with Moomins. I was one of the original American fans in the early 90s. And at some point, probably in the UK, because I'm half British, I picked up a Moomin book and just fell in love with these creatures. And I just sort of obsessed over them for many years. And then at some point in my 20s, I discovered the summer book.
Yeah.
And the summer book for me was, I grew up going to a place called Martha's Vineyard, which is on the East Coast, off the coast of Massachusetts. And it's our version of a summer house, living, a little different than here. But but I think that sort of family connection, all living under one roof for 2 months of the year, engaging in all your senses. I can remember what everything looked like, felt like, tasted like. And so I think for me, the summer book was the first thing that I read that captured a feeling of the summer, and not through heavy plot or anything like that, but just like what the experience was for me. And then I also think it transports you to a place, and so I think I always had this idea of like what the Finnish archipelago looked like. And I had never been, but I felt like I knew what it was like, from reading this book. And then it wasn't until COVID hit that I went back and reread the book. And I think like most people during COVID, you're sort of looking back at your life and questioning everything, what you're doing and why. And for me, it was really, I felt like the things that were most important to me were family and nature. Those were the two things. And I reread the summer book, and I said, oh, this is it.
That's what you want to do.
This is the most important thing in the world. And I really felt like it was a really important story to tell, and so it's kind of a long journey of how it happened, but tracked down who had the rights to the book at the time, and ended up flying to Helsinki, and I met with Sophia, and I think she had gone through decades of this book. It's going to happen, and then it falls apart. It's going to happen, and then it falls apart.
Really
and
happening.
And then there's this American guy coming in being like, I'm going to make this movie.
Well,
and she's like, sure.
You're sitting here. So.
Yeah, and I think for me it was, I felt like there was, because we agreed we wanted it to be on a global scale. So of course there's plenty of incredible actors that could do a Finnish version, a Swedish version, but we really wanted to make this a sort of global film. And so for me, there was maybe 3 women that could play grandmother that could get the movie made. And Glenn Close was my first choice.
8 times Oscar nominated Glenn Close. So how did you get her? She's playing the grandmother in the film.
Yeah. Oh wow, there she is. Yeah. And that's also 3 hours of prosthetics every day that she went through to age her to about 90 years old. Because Glenn has less wrinkles on her face than I do. And so I looked at her and I was like, you're not nearing the end of your life. and she would stomp around the island, and like she was so active. And for me, I've just been really lucky in casting in that I just sort of believe you team up with the people that you're supposed to make the film. And of course, everyone knows her talent. But for me, I felt like she was the right partner to collaborate with. And I felt like she was the person that would understand and connect to this world. She lives in Montana, outside of Hollywood. She's not a part of, the sort of LA Hollywood lifestyle. And so we approached her, and then I found out that she was a big fan of Moomin. And so that was actually the first way in. She had never read the summer book. She didn't know what it was, but she loved Moomin. And then she ended up reading the book and then the script, and we got on a Zoom, and she was like, I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah, and from what I understand, she was super passionate about the project. She even insisted on sleeping on the set.
Yeah, so
which was we built as a set.
Yeah,
not as a proper
so
house.
we built the house. We filmed in the Finnish archipelago, based in a town called Kotka, and we filmed on this little island, which was about 45 minutes to an hour boat ride from Kotka.
Sounds really convenient.
Yeah, it was super convenient. A little side note: when I went to film school, they said there was 3 don'ts: never shoot on an island, never work with kids, and never work with animals, and I did all 3 in one movie.
There's a cat in
which I don't know why I did that, but anyway, Glenn just fell in love with this island, and I mean, this is an island with there's not running water, there's not electricity, we are off the grid.
Yeah,
and so we built this house, and Glenn, towards the end of the shoot, she was like, I think I'm gonna stay in the house in the little room. And I was like, Glenn, we don't have mattresses. This is essentially a movie set. And she was like, yeah, but I think I can just put some blankets down. It'll be comfortable enough. And I was like, you do you. I'm going home to the sauna. You can hang here. And she ended up moving into the little room, and we'd give her a little plate of food before we left, and we'd be like, all right, see you tomorrow. And she loved it. I mean, she fell in love with Helsinki, Finland, and then the island. Yeah. And action!
The name of the girl?
Emily, yeah.
So, I mean, you did an enormous casting process to find her. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, the casting process was mostly based here in Stockholm. And I mean, it started with many, many tapes when I was in LA, and I'd wake up and get, 100 new tapes. And I think we saw thousands of girls. And there was this one girl, she was 7 at the time, Emily, and never acted before. And I saw this little face come on, and it was, 30-second clip, and she just says her name, and she tells a joke. And at the end of the joke, she just goes, oh my God, that was so stupid. and I thought that was such a funny thing for a 7-year-old to be self-aware enough that the joke was not funny and it was so dumb. And everyone else was kind of actory and told what to do. And
professionals already.
Yeah, and I thought, I just loved that clip. And so I would say to my wife, I would always say well, it's Emily until it's someone else. And I was always sort of joking about that, because we saw a lot of girls who had acted before, who had done theater, who had done some film. And I figured it would be one of them based on the fact that we're shooting with Glenn Close, we're shooting on an island, on a budget, all these things. And I ended up flying. She lives in Finland. We flew her here.
She has a dad who's from...
Her dad's from the UK.
So that's why she's a native speaker.
Yeah, so she has a British accent in English, but her first language is Finnish. And we saw about 10 girls in person. And this little girl, Emily, is just such a special human. And really kind of reminded me of a Moomin character as well. There was something there's a openness to her, and also so much depth and a sadness in a beautiful way. Not a sad kid, but there's something really interesting about her. And so I remember, kind of pulling the trigger of like, I'm going to cast Emily. And it was one of the scarier moments of my life because she had never acted before. And I had no idea what I was going to get apart from talking to her and working with her a little bit. And she was incredible. Yeah. She was amazing. And her first film is pretty much every scene is with Glenn Close. And what's amazing is she didn't really know who Glenn was.
She wasn't.
And so she's just kind of like, at the end, she's kind of like making fun of Glenn and like, talking back to her. And it was amazing.
Yeah. So you already mentioned that you were doing one of those three things, filming on an island that you shouldn't, outside of Kotka. I mean, we could talk so much about that, but I'm just going to ask one question. So what was the most surprising thing about having that kind of a shoot?
I mean, the weather's insane, like absolutely crazy. So I realized that like I couldn't go to work in like shorts and a t-shirt, even though it was hot and sunny in the morning. I had to also bring a winter coat because at some point during the day, it was going to shift and drop many degrees and become freezing. And so I think the natural elements is what made it incredibly difficult and also what made it special, and I think that for me, like I really wanted to, and I've spent the last few years of my life really in Scandinavia, and I wanted to sort of immerse myself in the culture, but also in just the shifts in weather. I've spent a lot of time now in Finland in post-production in the winter, and I have a totally new appreciation and understanding for summer. It's literally just winter for 9 months, and then summer hits, and it's like, this is the greatest time in the world.
At least it's light.
It's light, and then I felt bad for making a movie and like taking people away from their summer holiday. I've like called people up being like, I'm sorry that you had to work in July. Like now I get it, but it's what made it special. You adapt, you change. All of a sudden when a storm comes through and that wasn't predicted, like you have to change in the moment. You have to rewrite, you have to shoot a scene that takes place in the rain that you thought was going to be in the sun. And it's what's beautiful about this place. It's so unpredictable, it's magical. And so for me, what I wanted to do was being such a fan of Tove Jansson's writing, and especially with the summer book, is I wanted to capture a feeling and capture the authenticity of this place. And so does it veer away from the book and highlight other things? Yes, of course. It's a different medium, but the thing that I think is true to the book is it captures the feeling of being in this place. It captures the relationships between being a young girl and going through grief and going through the beginning of your life, being the grandmother who's come to peace with the end, is also scared of the end, and comes to accept the end when it's time. And so I wanted to capture those relationships, and I feel like we were lucky enough to be able to do that.
Amazing. I wish you all the luck with that.
Thank you.
Film.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
me.
for coming.
Yeah. Thank you guys.